In the remote area of the north of the Heavenly Dragon Empire, Tianzai Castle was located. The structure erected on the snowy mountain has a 100-year history. It has a great reputation due to the fact that it takes only women into the ranks of its students, and each of those who study in it is even more beautiful than the previous one. Among the mountains, on a deserted corner of Tianzai Castle, the main character practices the use of weapons, honing his fighting skills. Brandishing his long spear, he, suffering from fatigue accumulated during the training, declares that he will not give up for anything, even if there is not a drop of Kai blood in him and he cannot cultivate. Making another lightning lunge, cutting the air with his weapon, and uttering loud exclamations, he shouts that he will continue to try his best. His strength is already running out, and the hero freezes, breathing heavily and dropping drops of sweat from his chin. With a deafening thud, he hits the back of the spear on the ground and leans on it with his whole tired body. Cursing loudly and exhaling heavily, he declares that he is absolutely exhausted. Staggering from exhaustion, he drops his weapon to the ground, causing it to make a loud clang. Suddenly, a feminine silhouette appears behind him, who, addressing the main character, who has fallen to his knees from fatigue, calls out to him, calling him a young master. Coughing from fatigue, the hero continues to shudder at the very ground. A beautiful girl in perplexity asks the main character why he is here again, declares that he is only hurting himself, but the hero tries to calm her down by calling her sister Xiao Lion, and tells her that he is fine and that he just wanted to work out a little. But the girl, covering him with a warm cape that she brought with her, objects to him, calling him the young master of their castle. She says that the hero should take care of his health. After that, she informs him that the lord of the castle asked her to bring the hero back, but adds that if the lord sees him in this state, he will be extremely excited. The hero, in response to Xiao Lion's remarks, silently lowers his head, leaning on his spear. The girl sighs heavily and sadly asks how many more times she will have to speak before the hero hears her. The same one addresses her by name, forcing the girl to look at him questioningly. The hero declares that he knows that trying to cultivate when he has no Kai blood only harms him, but then he convinces Xiao Lion that even in this case, he will not give up so easily. In response to his words, the girl only looks down worriedly, again calling him a young master. Changing the subject, the hero asks her to hurry up and go inside, exclaiming that the lord of the castle is already waiting for them. But as soon as they entered, they began to look at them haughtily from all sides. A lot of girls looked down on the hero. Someone announced his arrival, someone sarcastically asked what he was doing here, and someone just clicked contemptuously, pretending sincere surprise. One of the girls asked why the lord of the castle insists that the hero hang around here, calling him garbage. Someone in response declares that he is here only because of his aunt, because otherwise, according to the girl, such garbage would never have received permission to enter here. Xiao Lion, irritated and with a bit of sadness, silently looks at the girls crowded behind them, many of whom smiled contemptuously after them. But the main character did not even look up. He silently walked past them, not paying attention to their insults to him. But the girls did not let up. One of them continues to throw humiliating words at the main character. She calls him a man who only knows how to hide behind his back. Someone once again allows himself an insult to him, calling him garbage, and someone exclaims that the hero is the worst and pathetic. And even though he didn't show it, it was safe to say that he felt lonely, as if everyone in the world hated and despised him. He knows that these girls look down on him because he is weak and cannot cultivate. Feeling dozens of contemptuous glances, he realizes that they hate him because he is the son of the previous lord of the castle. The hero realizes that the anger directed in his direction is caused by the fact that he violated the secret rule of Tianzai, which states that a lord cannot marry or have a child. The hero knows that his mother not only violated this rule, but also ran away with the same man as soon as she gave birth to him. Clenching his fist with all his might from anger and a sense of injustice, the hero painfully realizes that to this day nothing has been heard about his parents. Suddenly, the hero's thoughts are interrupted by a familiar voice. The girl, calling the hero Tianyun, rejoices that he is finally here. The hero turns around and realizes by someone's exclamation that Lady Lord is behind him. The same one, gazing intently at the hero, only asks him if he has sneaked into the street again to improve in the martial art. It becomes clear that her name is Shizu Yun, and that she really is the current lord of Tianzai Castle. After a while, Tianyun calls her aunt in response to her question, but Shizu Yun, genuinely worried about the hero, says that he does not look good, and then asks if everything is fine with him. In response to her concern, the hero convinces her that he is fine. According to the memories of the previous bearer of this body, Shizu Yun and Tian Yun could not even think that they were related by blood. The memories of the time when they were still children make it clear that because his mother asked him to take care of him, Shizu Yun protected him all this time. And even though she understood that he would not be able to cultivate, she would do anything to help and support him. Interrupting the hero's reverie again, the Lord turns to him and asks what he is thinking about. Lightly tapping her index finger on Tian Yun's forehead, she told him that she didn't blame him for cultivating, but asked him to remember the boundaries. And then he adds that if the hero does not agree with this, then she will get angry at him. After Shizu Yun scolded the main character, she, to his surprise, hands him a dark red box covered with a floral pattern, and declares that it is for him. Tian Yun, surprised by the sudden gift from his aunt, asks her what it is. Without waiting for her answer, he opens the box and discovers something lying on a yellow pillow in it. The hero exclaims in shock that it is a divine dragon blood pill. Under the general surprise of the girls, who have been following the dialogue of the heroes all this time, Tian Yun realizes that the divine dragon blood pill is very expensive and valuable. And what they say is that it contains a huge amount of Kai blood. He is surprised to realize that the Lord has paid a high price to get her. She, with a completely incessant face, confirms his assumptions, stating that it is, and it really is a divine pill, and then asks the hero to take it. She says that the divine dragon blood pill will greatly increase the concentration of Kai blood in Tian Yun's body. The main character tries to object to his aunt, but she gently touches his cheek with her finger and smiles sincerely, silencing him. She objects to him that she will not accept any objections, and asks him to use her and renew his blood. And with the same sincere warmth, she tells him that this is all she wants for him. Suddenly, this touching scene is interrupted by a girl. She politely bowed in front of Shizu Yun, informs that the people from the Sky Spirit clan are already here. In response to this news, the hero repeats her words with surprise, as if not believing in them. On these lands, the factions are divided into 5 levels. The 5th level is the Divine Nation, the 4th is the Great Empire, the 3rd is the Honorable Estate, the 2nd is the Great Clan, and finally the 1st is the Great Castle. The hero understands that the Sky Spirit clan is 1 level higher than Tianzai Castle. Shizu Yun, turning to Tian Yun, asks him to return to his place because she has a lot of things that she needs to sort out. And after that, she, turning away from the hero, loudly commands the others to follow her. As soon as the aunt left the hero alone, he began to realize that the Sky Spirit clan just wanted to force Tianzai Castle to give them their slot so that she could infiltrate the ancient ruins. But he bitterly realizes that he is not able to do anything about it, because he is too weak. The hero, lowering his head, begins to think about what will happen if he restores his Kai blood. But before he could even finish his thought, he was loudly called out, without even calling by name. Tian Yun, startled by the suddenness, raised his head in surprise. He saw 3 strong guys in front of him, who were clearly not looking at him with good intentions. The guy who was right in front of him sarcastically asks, calling him a young master, if the hero wants to give them a divine pill. He declares that they need it in order to break through to the next level. And then the guy sarcastically adds that it won't work on the hero anyway, so why not give it to them? The hero knows this guy. It was a disciple outside Tianzai Castle, Feng Cheng. Tian Yun angrily recalls that these scoundrels shamelessly entered their Tianzai Castle, thanks to the Sky Spirit clan, in order to find their Dao partners. But the hero is not going to obey right away. He asks what will happen if he does not refuse. In response to this, Feng Cheng menacingly looms over him and with a surprised exclamation and a sarcastic smile asks him if he really thinks he has the right to refuse. He asks, accusing Tian Yun about why he behaves like an upstart, and makes the assumption that this is due to the fact that the hero is under the protection of the castle. Smiling nastily again, Feng Cheng calls the hero just garbage, because even his own mother abandoned him. Unable to stand the guy's insolence, Tian Yun loudly insults him, causing him true anger. In this rush, Feng Cheng instantly swings at the hero, simultaneously wishing him death. Without even having time to follow the opponent's fist, Tian Yun receives a strong blow to the jaw, which only caused him to gasp loudly before collapsing to the ground. Falling flat on his face, the hero did not even notice how the box fell out of his hands, opening from the impact on the ground and causing the precious divine dragon blood pill to roll on the floor. One of the guys who came with Feng Cheng exclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of others to the fallen treasure. The hero, being exhausted, denies what is happening with horror. But to his suffering, the guy who just hit him just laughs and declares that Tian Yun doesn't need her anyway. With another contemptuous smile, Feng Cheng jerked towards the pill, intending to take it away from the hero. But, to his surprise, the hero shouted for him to take his hands away from her and grabbed his wrist. In the rush of the fight, Tianyun did not notice how he took and swallowed the pill himself. In response to this, Feng Cheng only became more furious and asked in shock how Tianyun dared to eat his divine dragon blood pill at all, and stated that he was going to kill the main character for it. He, shouting that he would force the hero to spit it out, together with his two companions rushed at Tianyun, intending to strike again. But to Feng Cheng's screams, the hero only declares that he will not get the pill even if he dies. And at the same moment, strange flashes flashed around the hero, and an unknown voice congratulated him and announced that the player Yui Tianyun had successfully activated the account of the insane pumping system. The hero opened his eyes with all his might and asked himself in surprise where this voice came from and what happened. He will see how his entire entourage broke into many pieces, and the three guys flying at him with their fists froze. The hero was in a state of shock, continuing to endlessly try to understand what was going on. He was asking why these people who attacked him were now frozen in the air. But instead of answering, he again heard a voice from nowhere, informing him that he had received 1,000 experience points. But the hero did not have time to realize his words, as under the new congratulations that the player Yui Tianyun increased his level and reached the first stage of body refinement, he was thrown into the air. But then, without even pausing, the voice sounded again, notifying the hero that he had again increased his level, having already reached the second stage of body refinement. Not understanding what was happening, Tianyun just kept asking questions, trying to figure out what kind of crazy leveling system and what kind of player he was talking about. But the voice wouldn't let up. He again proclaimed that this time the player, having increased his level again, had already reached the 5th stage of body refinement. Suddenly, a panel appeared in front of the hero's eyes and a rapidly filling loading strip. Clenching his fist with all his strength, the hero felt the power filling him. Ordering the villains to get lost, he swung and hit Feng Cheng with all his strength in the stomach. His partner, who was about to attack the main character, only shockingly uttered the name of his friend, who fell backwards. Feng Cheng's face was contorted with a grimace of pain, while Tianyun stood threateningly, and his fist was smoking from the power overflowing him. He looked in surprise at his palm, which was now emitting a blue glow. His eyes lit up with newfound strength, and he asked himself with an enthusiastic smile, "Is this really the system of insane pumping?" Feng Cheng was on one knee, gasping for breath. His friends were behind him, on both sides. He was breathing heavily and looking at Yui Tianyun with horror. He asked in shock if the main character had already earned the 5th level of body refinement. He denied his own words, saying it couldn't be. In this world, the stages of cultivation are divided into 9 stages. The first is the stage of body improvement. The second is the stage of spirit improvement. The third is the stage of core consolidation. The fourth is the stage of spirit avoidance. The fifth is the stage of Zen transformation. The sixth is the spiritual stage of Zen. The seventh is the stage of the Spirit King. The eighth is the stage of the Sacred King. The ninth is the stage of the Divine King. Yui Tianyun looked down on Feng Cheng with undisguised contempt. He looked down at him and invited him to verify his own words for himself. But the hero had one single thought in his head. He would never have thought that one pill from dragon's blood would help him so much. Out of fear, Feng Cheng bowed his head in front of Yui Tianyun and began to tremble. He pleaded with the main character and begged to let him go, saying that he was wrong about him. Continuing to tremble with fear, Feng Cheng swore to Yui Tianyun that he would never dare to ask him to give him a pill again. To which the main character, enjoying his absolute superiority over the enemy, ordered him to either rot or bow down before him, and maybe then he would give him a chance. Feng Cheng was shamefully silent and trembled all over his body. Yui Tianyun, in response to this, silently sighed and began to turn away from him. But, suddenly, a sharp blade was waved in the air, and the face of the now defeated enemy was reflected in it. With a grimace of true anger, Feng Cheng rushed at Yui Tianyun, intending to get even with the enemy who had so humiliatingly defeated him. He rushed at him from behind, rapidly reducing the space between them, and shouted for the main character to roll on all 4 sides. Feng Cheng's blade had already almost pierced Yui Tianyun's body, but to the surprise of the enemy, he turned around sharply and grabbed him by the collar of his robe, lifting him off the ground. The main character swung and knocked Feng Cheng down with all his strength, pressing him into the floor and causing the ground to split under his body. Filled with anger, Yui Tianyun shouted at the enemy, as if asking if he was still trying to sneak attack him. The main character squeezed Feng Cheng's wrist in his hand, who was still holding a blade in his palm, with which he intended to attack Yui Tianyun. Without hesitating for a second, the protagonist plunged the weapon directly into Feng Cheng's chest, causing him to grimace in pain and horror. Having done this, Yui Tianyun kicked his enemy's limp body, causing him to fly away a dozen meters. Feng Cheng only managed to let out a pitiful exhale. One of his companions, who had been standing aside in silence all this time, called him by name out of the horror that overwhelmed him. Yui Tianyun, seeing the condition of his enemy, suddenly thought that perhaps there was poison on the tip of the dagger. And then, to his surprise, a voice from nowhere spoke again, congratulating him, and this time stating that the main character had successfully killed Feng Cheng, a disciple of the Heavenly Spirit sect, thereby earning 300 experience points and 5 insane points. Without stopping, he congratulated him again and informed him that Yui Tianyun had acquired the Eagle Clan technique and the Falling Feather Sword technique, as well as one recovery pill. To the new surprise of the main character, a window appeared before his eyes again, thanks to which he could see all his techniques and other objects. Additional information about the techniques stated that both of them had a low rank. Yui Tianyun saw through the translucent menu how Feng Cheng's comrades rushed to his aid, despite the fact that he had been dead for a long time. The only question in his mind was, did they give him a reward for killing him? The window changed again. Now it displayed Yui Tianyun himself, surrounded by many cells. The word above his image was status, and below, under the window itself, were his characteristics. They read as follows: the player's name is Yui Tianyun. The player's level is the 5th. The player's experience is 300 points out of 1,000. Madness points are 5. The player's cultivation technique is not. The player's skills are the Eagle Clan technique, the Falling Feather Sword technique. The skill is Madness Mode, level 1. Yui Tianyun looked at this window in surprise and only wondered if this was it. He, having thought of it, immediately exclaimed that these characteristics were like from some kind of game. He immediately realized that for a gamer, this is a no-brainer. The voice again announced new information. He again congratulated the player Yui Tianyun on the successful activation of the character, and added that he receives a box of newbie gifts. Immediately after that, the voice asked the main character if he wanted to open it. Yui Tianyun confidently looked at the window and also voiced his agreement. In response to this, the voice announced that the main character receives a 10-fold experience card, which, however, will only be valid for 1 hour, 2 regulatory pills and a box of gifts for a beginner of the 5th level. Yui Tianyun realized that his body has no cultivation abilities at all, so the system of increasing the level that has appeared will help him a lot. The window made a loud sound, and the main character realized that if he increased his level, he would become insanely strong. However, after that, he immediately asked the question, what kind of madness mode is this? Without thinking twice, he pressed his finger on the window, right on the button that says madness mode. In response to this, the voice began to explain the mechanism of this mode. He explained that the madness mode can double any effect, including alchemy, taking potions, attack, cultivation, gaining experience, and much more. Yui Tianyun could only smile in surprise. The main character asked if everything could be strenuously doubled, and this is only the 1st level. He exclaimed that it was just a divine skill. Yui Tianyun smiled broadly and said that the effect of cultivating and taking the potion could be surprising. From this, the main character realized that taking 1 pill would be regarded as taking 2 pills. But then Yui Tianyun twitched and forced himself to stop in his own reasoning. He saw a message in the window saying that madness mode absorbs 1 point of madness every minute. He looked at his number again. He only has 5 madness points. The main character swore and said again that the madness mode would take away 1 point from him every minute. He said that he now has only 5 points of insanity, and that all this will disappear if he only blinks. Breathing heavily, he concluded that the reward for killing Feng Cheng was too low for him. Interrupting Yui Tianyun's thoughts, the plaintive cries of Feng Cheng's comrades resounded throughout the square, who repeatedly echoed his name, until finally one of his comrades proclaimed, trembling all over, that he was dead. He turned to Yui Tianyun, who was standing silently to the side, and while his face was distorted with unbearable anger, he shouted that it was the main character who killed him. But Yui Tianyun was cold. He looked contemptuously and calmly at Comrade Feng Cheng and asked him if he had killed him. The main character said that if he had not attacked him with a blade, the outcome would have been completely different, and Feng Cheng would have been alive. Suddenly, interrupting their conversation, footsteps were heard, and a female voice loudly asked what was going on here. Yui Tianyun turned around and realized that it was his aunt Shizu Yun. The girls who came with her found a body lying on the square a second later, and exclaimed in shock that someone had died. Lord Shizu Yun stood silently by and looked down angrily. Feng Cheng was lying lifeless on the ground with a knife sticking out of his chest. Suddenly, a man's voice turned to Aunt Yui Tianyun, calling her the Lord of the Soup, and asked what was going on here. Shizu Yun turned around in surprise and saw the one who addressed her. This person turned out to be a disciple of the Heavenly Spirit sect, Feng Yun. Next to him was another man, the second elder of the Heavenly Spirit sect, Zhao Hualong. The girls gathered in the square made way for them. Lord Shizu Yun only addressed one of them, Elder Zhao Hualong. But as soon as they approached the place around which everyone was gathered, the disciple Feng Yun was horrified by the picture he saw. He rushed to the lifeless body and plaintively called Feng Cheng by name. He bent over him and angrily addressed him, calling him brother, brother, repeating that he had been killed. Then, with undisguised anger, he turned to Yui Tianyun and exclaimed that he had killed his brother. But, ignoring Feng Yun's grief, the protagonist coldly told him that their people wanted to take his precious dragon blood pill, and that he just rebuffed them. In response to his words, one of Feng Cheng's comrades, who attacked Yui Tianyun and tried to take the pill from him, exclaimed that they did not steal anything from the main character, and that it was all a setup. He stated that they were just out for a walk, and Yui Tianyun beat them up. His friend picked him up and began to confirm his words, saying that everything was like that, and they just decided to take a walk, and the main character allegedly said that this was his territory, and the first one eventually attacked them. He didn't let up and kept saying that before they realized everything, Yui Tianyun attacked Feng Cheng. The words of these two convinced Elder Zhao Hualong, and he gritted his teeth and asked in surprise how their disciples could decide on something so low. He turned to Shizu Yun and demanded that she bother to find an explanation for this. His face took on a menacing and disappointed look, and he said that only the best students were allowed to join the palace. Zhao Hualong stated that they wanted to continue the relationship between their families. The elder admitted that he didn't expect any of his students to get hurt just walking around the castle grounds. And, addressing Shizu Yun, Zhao Hualong asked her if the Lord really wanted to destroy the existing relationship. Offended by his statements, Shizu Yun menacingly forced him to explain himself, asking what he was hinting at. Interrupting their conversation, Feng Yun shouted, pointing at Yui Tianyun that he had killed his brother, and therefore he demanded a deadly duel between the two of them. Elder Zhao Hualong, breathing heavily, said that this was a fair petition. He stated that their students had not violated the rules of Tianzai Castle. Pointing at Yui Tianyun, he said that he had injured them and also killed Feng Cheng. Adjusting his mustache and looking at everyone with contempt, he added that one should not turn a blind eye to this, and offered to resolve it with the help of a fair fight in the arena. Zhao Hualong said that whether it will be a defeat or a victory, the decision will be made based on the results of the match. Shizu Yun joined the elders' conversation, defending Yui Tianyun. She stated that the main character is not part of the selection team, so the Heavenly Spirit sect needs to choose another disciple. But Zhao Hualong was furious. He turned to the Lord, saying that he didn't care whether Yui Tianyun was a member or not. He announced that the matter was that he had challenged the authority of their Heavenly Spirit sect to a duel. The elder stooped menacingly and, exhaling heavily, asked if they really wanted to provoke a deterioration of the situation. But Shizu Yun insisted on her own and was not going to back down. She stated that she refused it and that they could choose any student except him. Yui Tianyun heard the voices behind him again. A lot of girls started insulting him again. One said that he, Tianyun, was trash with a lack of Kai in his blood. Someone said that the main character would die quickly in a fight, and Tianzai Castle would fall. The third voice confirmed the previous words, saying that everything was right, and he was a terrible loser. He just made too much noise. But all of them decided that this whole situation would end badly for the Heavenly Castle. The main character heard them, but did not utter a word. Zhao Hualong suddenly said that if he remembered correctly, then Yui Tianyun was the son of their previous lord. He sarcastically continued to say that, allegedly, there are rumors that the main character does not have enough blood energy and that he could die at any moment. The elder of the Heavenly Spirit sect added that it was no wonder that the master of the Heavenly Castle did not want him to participate in the duel. He looked at Yui Tianyun and said that even if he is a scum and does not possess Kai, and this battle is just a waste of their time, now the main character is the man who killed their disciple and challenged their authority. Zhao Hualong said that otherwise they would not have such ties in the future. Out of anger, Yui Tianyun clenched his fists, but to the surprise of all the surrounding people, Shizu Yun hit the elder of the Heavenly Spirit, leaving a slap on his face. Zhao Hualong could not withstand the blow of the Lord and collapsed almost to the ground, and only the fact that his disciples picked him up allowed him to stay on his feet. Holding onto his burning cheek, he shouted at Zhu Yun's soup in bewilderment, asking what she was doing. And was she really looking for a war because of this fool? But Zhao Hualong's words did not confuse the Lord in any way. She looked at him menacingly and said that the word is not a sparrow. If it crashes, you won't catch it. She asked the elder of the heavenly spirit if Zhao Hualong had heard such an expression. Zhu Yun asked him, if Tianyun is a non-entity, then are those three lying on the ground even worse than non-entities? Zhao Hualong got to his feet and lowered his gaze menacingly. He assured Zhu Yun that she had made a big mistake. He told her that this slap was disrespectful to him and his clan. The elder of the heavenly spirit sect, stopping his angry disciples, asked the Lord if he was wrong. Then why did she not want Yui Tianyun to fight? Enraged, Zhao Hualong angrily said that he would not want problems for him, but he had killed their man and therefore should be responsible for his actions and their consequences. Zhu Yun glared back at him angrily. The Lord said that she was sure that Yui Tianyun would never have attacked without a reason. And this whole situation happened only because of their thieving students. And after that, she threatened that if they still blame Tianyun, then let them not expect her to be polite to them. Yui Tianyun stared in shock at the light surrounding her aunt Zhu Yun. He realized that it was the aura of a strong person at the stage of Zen condensation. At the same moment, the girls standing behind them began to draw their swords and grin at the members of the Heavenly Spirit sect, ready for battle. But the disciples of the sect did not just stand there. With an unkind smile, they also drew their weapons from their scabbards, intending to attack. But to everyone's surprise, Yui Tianyun spoke up. He loudly proclaimed that he accepted the challenge and would fight on behalf of the heavenly castle. All the people surrounding him uttered surprised exclamations, and even the girls who insulted him more than once were shocked by what they heard. A moment later, the same voice rang out again, notifying Yui Tianyun of a new task. It consisted in the fact that the main character had to defeat a disciple of the Heavenly Spirit sect and lead the Heavenly Castle to victory. Yui Tianyun did not understand this message. He asked himself, what does it mean to win? Is this a side quest? But, exhaling deeply and assuming a threatening look, he declared that this task was as ordered. The window reappeared above Yui Tianyun, and a voice from nowhere loudly announced that the reward for completing the mission would bring the protagonist 10,000 experience points and 200 gold, and heavenly armor in the amount of 1 armor unit. Silhouettes of awards appeared in the air in front of Yui Tianyun's eyes, which had just been voiced by a mysterious voice. In front of him floated the heavenly armor of God and 200 experience units, both of which glowed with a bright blue light. The main character looked at them with fascination and then said that this generous reward was really good. Everything that Yui Tianyun will receive for completing the task will be very useful, especially, as the main character noticed, experience will be useful. But a second later, he noticed one detail. Yui Tianyun realized that the weapon seemed rather low level to him. In this world, weapons and treasures are also divided by quality. There are 5 categories of weapons. The first class includes weapons of the usual type. The second type of weapon is a relic. The third class includes weapons of the sacred type. The fourth class includes weapons of the spiritual type. And finally, an artifact-type weapon belongs to the 5th class. Yui Tianyun, after thinking it over, decided that this was only an initial mission, so he couldn't expect too much. He narrowed his eyes, looking somewhere into the void. Zhao Hualong laughed nastily and sarcastically exclaimed that it was very good, and since the main character agreed to a duel, then the lord of the castle of Zhu Yun should have absolutely no complaints against him. Concerned about Yui Tianyun's action, his aunt addressed him by name and very seriously asked him not to talk nonsense. Behind her, worried girls stood silently. The main character at first stood silently, listening to Zhu Yun's doubts, but then, with a heavy sigh, he spoke. He asked her, calling her auntie, to let him do it and join the duel. The main character said that if he cannot solve this problem himself, then he is not worthy of being protected by his own aunt. His eyes lit up with confidence and determination when Yui Tianyun promised that he would fight in this duel and bring victory to the great Tianzai castle. He looked up at the sky, and a strong wind hit him in the face, dispersing his desire in him. The surrounding people looked at him in silence, but in shock, when the lord of the castle of Tianzai Zhu Yun sighed and said with her pink lips that let it be so and that Yui Tianyun would represent them at the duel. The elder of the Heavenly Spirit sect, Zhao Hualong, met her resolute and menacing gaze with only a nasty grin. He said that in this case they would meet in 2 weeks and decide in the arena who is worthy to live and who is destined to die. Yui Tianyun said that he agreed to these conditions, but he set one but. The main character stated that the rest of the battle should be conducted according to standard rules and nothing else. Standing face to face, they looked into each other's eyes angrily. Zhao Hualong stated that the standard rules would naturally be taken into account. He added that they held a grudge against them and now only their battle would be deadly. The elder of the Heavenly Spirit sect only stared menacingly after Yu Tianyun and, turning around abruptly, loudly proclaimed to all his disciples who were from him on all sides that they were leaving. Yu Tianyun did not notice how one of Zhao Hualong's disciples came up behind him and hit him with his elbow with all his strength on the head. He glared at him and ordered the main character to prepare a coffin for himself and wait for his own death. Only soft footsteps echoed throughout the square as the people from the Sky Spirit clan walked away from Tianzai Castle. Following them with her gaze, Shi Zuyun said that was enough and ordered the girls, who had been on the square all this time, to return to their business without delay. The same, in response, politely bowed to the lady of the castle and obeyed, addressing her by status. But the girls, rapidly leaving the deserted square, continued to laugh and insult Yu Tianyun. They said that he had made a problem out of nothing, and now the place of the entire Tianzai Castle in the ancestral ruins would depend on this battle. Someone picked up one of the girls, saying that the main character is really worthless, but he still agreed to a duel. Someone aptly pointed out that even if we accept the fact that Yu Tianyun somehow managed to kill Feng Cheng, his brother, Feng Yun, is on a completely different level. The main character was left alone with Shi Zuyun in an empty temple. Castle Lord Tianzai turned to him and comforted him warmly, saying that when the time came, he would not need to force himself. She assured him that it wouldn't be a big deal even if he lost to his opponent. Shi Zuyun added that all that is important to her is that Yu Tianyun will remain alive, and she will be able to figure out everything else on her own. But despite her fears, the main character only smiled playfully. He looked directly into the eyes of the Lord of Tianzai Castle and asked her if she believed in him. Shi Zuyun turned to him uncomprehendingly and looked at him. But, a second later, she exhaled heavily, frowning, and fervently said that, of course, she believed in him. She clung to him, gently looking into his eyes and gently said that Yu Tianyun should make sure that he would not harm himself. The main character couldn't help smiling at his aunt's concern and gently calmed her down so that she wouldn't worry, and he would definitely win this duel. He smiled as sincerely as his pride allowed him, and with a pinch of sadness and some kind of fatigue, he said that even if he dies in the upcoming battle, the main character no longer intends to prostrate himself. Yu Tianyun blushed and asked Shi Zuyun to let him be stubborn, at least this time. The main character opened his eyes wide and looked at the Lord of Tianzai Castle. Yu Tianyun said that he did not want his aunt to be judged because of his act at all. The main character said that he didn't want anyone to hurt her again. In response to his frank and warm words, Zuyun's cheeks blossomed in her face, and her cheeks turned pink. Aunt was moved by Yu Tianyun's words, so much so that tears sparkled on her scarlet cheeks. She touchingly lowered her head and, covering her mouth with her hand, called the main character silly and asked what he was talking about at all. In response to her words, Yu Tianyun gently touched his aunt's cheek and wiped away the rapidly running hot tear. To the surprise of the Lord of Tianzai Castle, the main character asked what she meant by calling him a baby. He stated that Shi Zuyun is not much older than him at all. Yu Tianyun smiled sincerely and exclaimed that it was fitting for him to call her his big sister. But, in response to his tenderness, the Lord of Tianzai Castle only got embarrassed and angry and climbed at him with her fists. She hit Yu Tianyun on the head and loudly proclaimed that he was still a brute. The main character finds himself in his home in Tianzai Castle. Yu Tianyun was sitting in his room all alone, and even the shutters of his windows blocked the bright sunlight that was so persistently trying to get into his room. He was sitting on his bed and thinking out loud that, if you think about it, the main character has already received a bag with gifts of the 5th level, but has not yet opened it. He was overcome with curiosity, and he decided to see how good things could fall to him. With a familiar sound, blue translucent windows with text appeared again in front of Yu Tianyun's eyes, and the voice congratulated the main character again. He announced that Yu Tianyun had activated the lottery function. The voice also said that the main character received 3 recovery pills and 2 new skills. The first was the Great Star Absorption Technique, and the second was the Northern God of the Lower World. It also turned out that he had received a bag of gifts of the 11th level in addition. Yu Tianyun exclaimed enthusiastically that this was a very good start. He recited the names of the new skills again, namely the Great Star Absorption Technique and the Northern God of the Nether World. The main character looked at his reward with surprise and did not understand if he really got all these amazing fighting skills just for getting the 5th level. Having examined his acquired techniques in the windows that appeared, He announced that he couldn't wait to find out what skills he could get in the future. After that, Yui Tianyun added that he wanted to know what the lottery was about. By pressing his finger on the corresponding button that appeared in front of him, he activated the lottery. A disc with many compartments appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. These compartments contained inscriptions of things like divine abilities, cultivating techniques, consumables, ordinary materials, accessories, weapons and equipment, skills, and finally luck. Shocked by such an unusual sight, Yui Tianyun could only make a surprised sound. After taking another look at the ring, he began to reason. The main character noticed that consumables have too many slots, while skills and cultivating techniques have only a few. He subtly noticed that compared to the other categories, divine skills have the least slots. After thinking about it and making the appropriate calculations, Yui Tianyun concluded that, it turns out, the ratio to get what you want is 1 in 10,000. The main character confidently stated that he would need a lot of luck. But as soon as Yui Tianyun pressed the button again, the window popped up into the air again. A loud voice announced that, due to the fact that the main character opened the lottery for the first time, he is given as many as 3 free chances to play. Without thinking for a second, Yui Tianyun loudly agrees to the conditions of the voice and pulls his hand. A deafening sound is heard in the air, and a voice announces that the lottery wheel is activated. The wheel starts spinning at an inhuman speed, causing the symbols located on its square to flash insanely fast before Yui Tianyun's eyes. But the main character did not even think to look away. The only thing Yui Tianyun did was breathe heavily, endlessly saying the same thing. He whispered about what he wanted more than anything in the world: a divine ability. The tension from the rapid rotation of the lottery wheel forced the main character to squeeze both of his fists with all his might. Yui Tianyun was shaking with impatience and kept talking, asking for something to give him a divine ability. Finally, the lottery wheel stopped, but the main character did not have a divine ability at all. Yui Tianyun only dropped a weapon. But, even though he didn't get what he wanted so much, the main character was still incredibly happy. He exclaimed enthusiastically, enjoying the fact that he had at least a weapon. The voice notified Yui Tianyun again, congratulating him and saying that he had pulled out a weapon. Ice gloves. At the same instant, a silhouette of steel gauntlets with spikes like ice blades appeared in the air, which glowed with a bright blue light. Yui Tianyun looked at his new weapon with surprise, and asked if these were the ice gloves and if they were gloves. The main character began to read the description of the object displayed on a translucent blue window. Right above the image of the ice gauntlets themselves is a note explaining what the attribute of the ice attack is, namely that it reduces the speed of enemies. However, under the window with the picture of the weapon there was an inscription stating that this item has the usual quality, and that it can be improved. Below, a special skill was mentioned in a separate window. It stated that the player can use madness points, thereby freezing anything within a radius of 100 meters, and in this case this weapon will reduce the speed of everyone who falls under this effect. Yui Tianyun admired all this detailed information on the window. He enthusiastically declared that the speed reduction was a great effect, and that it was such a pity that this item only had the usual quality. But the main character immediately noticed that they could be improved, so he decided to leave them for later. Taking the newfound ice gloves in his hand, Yui Tianyun decided to sum up by looking at what he had in the end. Clicking on the translucent blue window again, he began to reason. The main character said that glasses are needed to improve. Yui Tianyun happily realized that this was a good thing, because he could easily earn the necessary experience for this. Touching the main character opened a new window in front of him with all his statistics. In front of him was the following. The player's name was Yui Tianyun. The player's level was the 5th. That is, the 5th stage of body improvement. The number of madness points was 5. The cultivation technique was the art of the northern god of the lower world, whose spiritual level or possession was 0 points out of 1,000. The hero's skills are the Great Star Absorption Technique, whose spiritual level or possession was 0 points out of 1,000. The player's weapons are ice gauntlets, whose quality was ordinary and possession was 0 points out of 1,000. The player's divine abilities are madness mode, which requires 10,000 madness points to improve. The last point shocked Yui Tianyun incredibly. He asked in surprise if this mode was asking for 10,000 madness points. The main character started to reason out loud and said that he only got 5 points for killing Feng Qing. He wondered if it could be that he would only get points by killing other people. Exhaling heavily, he only said dejectedly that this was really madness and that it was simply impossible. But after that, his old enthusiasm returned to him, and he decided that maybe he should play the lottery again. But as soon as he tried to make up his mind, a voice from nowhere, accompanying his speech with a new blue window, announced that the lottery wheel requires as many as 1,000 madness points for one game. Yui Tianyun was horrified by this news. He, as if not believing what he had heard, repeated the sum of 1,000 points again. Having moderated his ardor and cooled down, the main character tilted his head and exhaled heavily. Yui Tianyun decided that it should be so, and for the time being he would forget about it. The main character began to reason again. Yui Tianyun realized that Feng Yun is at the 17th level of body improvement, which is higher than the stage at which the main character is by 2 whole units, and the threatening silhouette of his future opponent appeared in front of Yui Tianyun's eyes. The main character firmly understood that he just needed to focus on raising his level. Yui Tianyun confidently lowered his eyebrows and proclaimed that it was then that he would definitely win an absolute victory in the upcoming duel. Moonlight filtered through the shutters of the windows in Yui Tianyun's room, falling on his body as he sat cross-legged on the floor in silence. There was nothing but confidence and determination in his eyes. In the blink of an eye, he was on the roof of the temple and, hidden behind the darkness of the night, pushed off somewhere high. The main character did it so quickly and imperceptibly that the girl with a lantern patrolling the street below didn't even pay any attention to him. With insane strength and speed, pushing off from the ledges of the rocks, Yui Tianyun raced at full speed, covering incredible distances in seconds. Having cut the air with his jumps, the main character finally landed firmly and with a loud sound on the ground. He looked around confidently and playfully and announced that he should start already. And Yui Tianyun, who was dangerously holding his trusty spear in his hand, began to be surrounded by dozens of snow-white wolves, each of which had 2 red eyes filled with bestial rage and madness. Yui Tianyun stood in the middle of an icy desert, surrounded by dozens of wild snow wolves, whose skins were barely visible against the background of the surrounding mountains, and red eyes expressed nothing but animal hunger. Only these flashes allowed the main character to understand where his enemies were in this pitch-black night. Yui Tianyun stood confidently and realized that it had been a long time since he had been here. The main character knew that, judging by his memories, he had not seen this place for the first time. Yui Tianyun cautiously looked around, analyzing the situation, and said that the real owner of this body wanted to borrow the very essence of the wolf and improve his blood, but he was too weak and almost died. Suddenly, one of the white snow wolves threw its muzzle and, opening its mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, howled at the main character. The beast's eyes shone so brightly in the dark. But Yui Tianyun was not taken by surprise, and he said that this time everything will definitely turn out differently. At the same moment, the wild wolf broke from its own place and, growling deafeningly and aggressively, rushed at the main character. He ran so fast, pushing off with his thin but muscular paws with sharp claws, that the frozen ground, covered with ice and snow, crumbled under him, scattering cold crumbs in the wind. Yui Tianyun was ready to fight the beast, so, quickly taking a stance, he swung his long spear with a deafening battle cry and hit the wolf in the jaw. But, before the main character could catch his breath, the rest of the wolf pack rushed at Yui Tianyun, releasing sharp claws and exposing long fangs. The main character predetermined this and, with a dissatisfied click, said in disappointment that they were attacking from behind. Yui Tianyun swung his thin and light weapon again, this time hitting 2 snow wild wolves in the muzzles at once. However, this time, instead of letting the beasts fall to the ground, the main character decided to take advantage of the opportunity to apply his newly acquired technique. Yui Tianyun made a dash to the wolf and, swinging his hand, pronounced the name of the spell, namely the Eagle Claw technique. As soon as the main character grabbed the snow wolf by the fur, he instantly petrified and froze in the air, not even able to resist. He was trembling, but there was nothing he could do. Marveling at his own new abilities, Yui Tianyun chuckled and exclaimed that the Eagle Claw's grip was simply amazing. And after that, as if out of politeness and addressing a furious animal, the main character asked the wolf to let him try something else on him. Of course, without waiting for the wild snow monster's consent, Yui Tianyun shouted, about to apply another technique that he had recently received. He bent down and, allowing a gust of force to ruffle his hair and bright red lightning to sparkle in his confident eyes, he pronounced the name of his second ability, namely the star absorption technique. At the same moment, Yui Tianyun and the snow wolf, which he was holding by its snow-white fur, were surrounded by red bright glowing lightning, spiraling straight into the back of the stricken beast. The eyes of the main character lit up from the incredible power overflowing him. He shook and screamed. and immediately, as if on command, a new blue window appeared, accompanied by a familiar voice from nowhere. A mysterious voice announced that Yui Tianyun had gained 1 experience point, then continued that he had already gained 2 experience points, then 3 experience points. Holding the weakened mad wild animal by the throat, the main character's hand squeezed the barely alive beast with all its strength, glowing from the power flowing to it. But the voice wouldn't let up. He had already said that Yui Tianyun had gained 12 experience points, then 13 experience points. The muscles on the wrists of the protagonist tensed so much that Yui Tianyun began to tremble all over his body. And on the window, the numbers kept changing and changing incredibly fast. 36 experience points have already been obtained, now 37 experience points. Finally, the wild snow wolf let out his last breath, and his body went limp, and a grimace of shock and impotence froze forever on his muzzle. And at the same moment, a voice announced, congratulating Yui Tianyun that he had successfully killed the snow wolf. He added that thanks to this, the main character received 50 experience points and 3 madness points. The main character, without ceremony, threw the lifeless body of the previously incredibly dangerous beast to the ground and looked at his palm with some shock and concern. Marveling at his new strength, which he had recently received, Yui Tianyun said that this was what he expected from the star absorption technique. He confirmed his own assumptions and said that the technique devours someone else's Kai, and at the same time gives the main character experience. But a certain fear of his new incredible power, capable of taking someone else's life, was replaced after a moment by heated enthusiasm and a desire for easy pumping. And Yui Tianyun exclaimed that this was just wonderful, and that he immediately needed to continue. With a wide smile full of excitement, he rushed into the crowd of crazed snow wild wolves, intending to use the star absorption technique. Accompanying every victory of Yui Tianyun, the voice did not stop for a second. As soon as the main character once again took a new Kai from the body of a wild beast with burning eyes, the voice congratulated Yui Tianyun and exclaimed that he had successfully killed the snow wolf, and earned 50 experience points and 3 madness points. At one point, even the main character himself stopped noticing the number of defeated creatures, and only went into a rage. Yui Tianyun enthusiastically realized that he could feel the Kai blood circulating through his body, and the internal energy filling his meridians. The main character realized that his steps became much easier, and faster than they were before this simple battle. He smiled sincerely, contentedly, and with a slight gloating, happily realizing how the cultivator still feels. Looking back and seeing many more wild animals only more enraged, the main character exclaimed that there were still many snow wolves left, and that they should not be wasted. But as soon as the mad animals with burning scarlet eyes rushed at Yui Tianyun again, he decided that he would try out his new weapon and instantly put a glove with silver blades on his fist, making it glow with incredible strength. The main character made a sharp lunge, shouting the name of his weapon, the ice gauntlet, and a lot of bright lightning flashed around him again. In the blink of an eye, rushing into the crowd of snow wolves that were already about to attack Yui Tianyun, he scattered them all over their battle zone, killing several already lifeless beasts at once with one blow. And the voice accompanied this incredible blow with the announcement that the main character had successfully killed as many as 5 snow wolves, while receiving 2,500 experience points and 5 madness points. Looking around the battlefield and the lifeless bodies of his former bestial enemies, Yui Tianyun looked with a kind of madness and delight at his hand holding a silver weapon that smoked with glowing red streams of matter, and exclaimed with all inner delight that these ice gloves are amazing. Smiling all over his mouth and simultaneously opening his interface with the inventory, he looked at the objects. Finally, having found what he was looking for so hard, he said that now each wolf gives only 50 experience points, and that now is the time to use all the advantages. He solemnly exclaimed that now was the time to use the cards to gain tenfold experience. Yui Tianyun, standing in a confident and inviting stance and smiling heartily, exclaimed to the snow wolves that had already rushed at him, furiously opening their mouths full of incredibly sharp, dagger-like teeth so that they would attack him without delay. Wild, crazed animals did not contradict the main character and rushed at him with the whole impetuous crowd. Yui Tianyun soared into the air towards the snow wolves and, as if referring to the experience itself, exclaimed that he was following him and that he would definitely become stronger. The battle was unequal and therefore proceeded incredibly quickly, so much so that the main character stopped even noticing when he once again left his wild animal enemies defeated. and only a familiar unknown voice, when the hero left behind only the lifeless body of a snow wolf, endlessly congratulated Yui Tianyun and declared how many wolves he had killed and how many experience points and madness points he had earned so much. Thanks to the applied experience card in tenfold volume, the score of points was already tens of thousands, and the number of defeated enemies was hundreds. Here he has successfully killed 7 snow wolves, earning 3,500 experience points and 21 madness points. Here he has already killed as many as 9 snow wolves and has now earned as much as 4,500 experience points and 27 madness points. Now it's smaller. Yui Tianyun killed 5 snow wolves and received 2,500 points of precious experience and 21 points of madness. Only after an incredible amount of time, the main character, breathing very heavily, froze in the middle of a field with hundreds of lifeless bodies of wild snow wolves, finally allowing himself the necessary rest, and his ice glove, which he clenched into a fist, smoked with an unknown glowing red matter. Filled with an energy he had never seen before, Yui Tianyun only stood silently, listening to the voice speaking again, which announced to him that he had already successfully reached the 6th level of body improvement. Then again, the voice stated that the main character had already successfully reached the 7th level of body improvement. And finally, the voice, once again congratulating him, ended with the fact that Yui Tianyun had successfully reached the 8th level of body perfection. But, suddenly, continuing to breathe heavily, the main character heard an inhuman furious howl that sounded very close. Wearily, he shifted his gaze from his ice glove to the direction from which the animal sound was coming. Yui Tianyun's gaze opened to a high icy ledge of rock, illuminated by a bright incomplete moon, on which stood a black wolf silhouette with familiar burning eyes. But this was not one of those ordinary wolves whose lifeless bodies were now scattered all over the snow field. Above the shadowy silhouette, an inscription in a golden frame decorated with the head of a beast hung menacingly and solemnly, stating that the king of the snow wolves himself was standing in front of Yui Tianyun. The main character, as if not believing his own eyes, repeated what was written in the window, namely the name of the new opponent. Yui Tianyun quickly realized and exclaimed that it must be the boss. The main character added that his name is even in a gold frame. The new animal opponent looked much larger than his former comrades, his fur was much thicker, his teeth were longer, his eyes glowed with a bright yellow flame, and there was a clearly noticeable diamond-shaped brand on his forehead. Immediately, the familiar windows appeared in the air again, and a voice announced that Yui Tianyun had a new task, which was that he now needed to kill the Snow Wolf King. He added that the reward for completing this task will be not a little, 5 experience points and a whole challenge of a snow wolf as a mount. This statement caused the protagonist to be genuinely surprised, such that he repeated the last words of the voice about the sled animal. With an inner gloating and a grin, Yui Tianyun thought that the Snow Wolf King would rather die than become a mount. The main character liked this idea very much, so he smiled and said that that was why he simply had to complete this task. At the same moment, the Snow Wolf King roared with all his might and with his eyes burning with mad anger, with his mouth open, rushed to Yui Tianyun. The Snow White Wolf was huge, almost 5 times larger than the main character, and so strong that, rushing at Yui Tianyun, a glowing red barrier formed around him under the influence of his inner strength. But, of course, the main character didn't care a bit, and he rushed at the beast in response, even urging him on, wanting the fight to start faster. Yui Tianyun shouted at the top of his voice that he would get the Snow Wolf King into his mounts. Finally colliding, the opponents left behind an incredibly bright multicolored flash of energy. It's been 2 whole weeks since the training. As discussed, a lot of people gathered in the main square of the Tianzai Temple to watch the duel. But Yui Tianyun still did not show up, so, unable to stand the wait, one of the members of the Heavenly Spirit sect loudly and indignantly asked the audience where, in fact, the main character was. It turned out that it was Elder Zhao Hualong himself who spoke. He indignantly raised his hand in the direction of Shizu Yun, who was standing at a distance from him, and, turning to her, proclaimed that if Yui Tianyun did not show up, then everything would not end like last time. All the muscles of the elder's face tensed from the insult. Feng Yun immediately intervened. He asked in a fit of rage that if this loser had escaped, then how could he avenge the death of his brother Feng Cheng? But ignoring the indignation of the members of the Heavenly Spirit sect, Lord Shizu Yun looked at them firmly and confidently proclaimed that Yui Tianyun said that he was not going to run away. Unable to withstand the insolence of her opponents, she sincerely asked if they could wait a little. In response to the request of the main character's aunt, Zhao Hualong, grinning nastily, arrogantly said that he was betting that Yui Tianyun had stolen because he was scared and did not want to inevitably die in a duel. The elder ironically exclaimed that the heavenly castle of Tianzai had killed their disciple, and then disregarded the promise of battle. Zhao Hualong openly threatened that because of such audacity, they would have to give them the right to enter the ruins. Shizu Yun closed her eyes in rage and silently realized that she knew that, as expected, the goal of the members of the Heavenly Spirit sect from the very beginning was to rob their ruins. In a fit of superiority and arrogance, Zhao Hualong exclaimed that if the murderer escaped, the heavenly castle of Tianzai owed them. But before he could finish his thought, a familiar voice from somewhere above interrupted him. Zhao Hualong twitched and turned in the direction from which the voice came. There, on the roof of the temple, Yui Tianyun stood and ironically asked who told him that he was scared. Standing proudly on top of the building and causing all the followers of the Heavenly Spirit sect to turn to him in disbelief, Yui Tianyun deafeningly proclaimed that he was here, as promised. He calmly but confidently and with a bit of gloating asked if they were ready for battle. Yui Tianyun jumped off the roof of the temple with a lightning movement, leaving a trail in the air behind him. Hundreds of girls gathered below looked at the main character in surprise. One of them said in surprise that she sincerely believed that Yui Tianyun had escaped. Another girl keenly noticed that the main character looks untidy and dirty, and made a bold assumption that he had been hiding in the mountains all these few days. But, she timidly added that, to her surprise, she feels that Yui Tianyun seems to have changed. The main character was already standing proudly on the ground, and his appearance can really be described as shabby. Both on his clothes and on his face he had scuffs and small bruises, but he only smiled silently and steadfastly. Breaking the female whisper, Feng Yun loudly and maliciously admitted that at least Yui Tianyun was not a coward, since he still showed up for the duel. Zhao Hualun surprisingly politely said, addressing Lord Shizu Yun, that now that everyone was gathered, she should allow them to fight. The girls did not let up and began to whisper again, standing behind the aunt of the main character and looking at Yui Tianyun with some fear and doubt. Someone sincerely incomprehensibly asked why he still returned, and one, in response to this, assured that the main character would still lose with a bang. And only Shizu Yun stood silently, looking at the main character and thinking that he still came, no matter what. Zhao Hualong stood silently and looked at Yui Tianyun with disdain. But in his mind he said that since this underdeveloped one had appeared, they could easily win one round. The elder shouted loudly about the conditions of the duel, stating that the winner who wins 3 rounds out of 5 will get a place in the ancient ruins. Zhao Hualong turned to his students and asked which one of them would fight in the first round for the Tianzai Palace. Yui Tianyun, without hesitation, proudly said with a smile that, of course, it would be him. At the same moment, the main character felt a strong female hand grab his wrist. Yui Tianyun turned around and saw a worried Shizu Yun. The Lord of Tianzai Castle plaintively extended her tender hand to him and said fervently that if the main character could not fight, he could just give up and admit defeat. But in response to Shizu Yun's concern, Yui Tianyun only smiled affectionately and tenderly, calling her his aunt, and asked her not to worry. The main character assured the Lord of Tianzai Castle that he would never allow anyone to humiliate him again. With these words, Yui Tianyun turned away from Zhu Yun's shield and, sighing, headed for the ring, leaving her silently and fascinated to look after him. Zhao Hualong grinned maliciously and, addressing Feng Yun, whispered to Tom that he knew what he needed to do. In response to the elder's words, Brother Feng Cheng nodded to him and obeyed the order. Zhao Hualong sincerely grinned to himself, basking in superiority, and thought that thanks to the boy, he got a chance to humiliate Tianzai Castle, as well as take away their places in the ancient ruins. After finishing the internal monologue, the elder proudly announced in his voice that the first round of the battle for the ruins was beginning, and he added that the only way to admit defeat is to leave the arena, and in no other way. Yui Tianyun and Feng Yun stood in front of each other on the stone platform, which was an arena, and silently drilled each other with aggressive glances. Suddenly, Brother Feng Cheng rushed at his opponent with a furious look and yelled, calling the main character a scoundrel, that he would not let him leave this arena alive from him. Feng Yun exclaimed that he would torture Yui Tianyun until he himself begged to be killed. The guy swore that he would avenge his brother Feng Cheng. But in response to Feng Yun's threats, the main character only looked at him arrogantly and asked with a grin if he was serious. Yui Tianyun sarcastically told him to play around and show what he was capable of, and with these words beckoned him with his fingers, as if inviting him. These words made Feng Yun furious, and he, taking a stand and causing glowing red smoke to swirl around him, yelled for the main character to immediately apologize to his brother Feng Cheng. Feng Yun rushed at the hero, activating the eagle claw technique, and forced his hand to take the form of a bird's paw, dotted with sharp outgrowths, and light up with a bright red fire. Shizu Yun, in a fit of emotion, exclaimed Yui Tianyun so that he would not worry. The Lord of Tianzai Castle promised that if the situation became too dangerous for him, she would definitely save him. In response to her loud statement, Zhao Hualong only laughed and sarcastically asked if she really thought that this trash would really have time to survive. Feng Yun's hand swiftly jerked towards Yui Tianyun's throat, and he screamed for the protagonist to die faster at his hands. But despite the shouts of those around him, both supportive and insulting, Yui Tianyun lunged and instantly grabbed Feng Yun by the clawed paw. And a second later, to the opponent's horror, bright red lightning sparkled around the main character. His eyes flashed with superhuman strength, and Yui Tianyun himself pronounced the name of his own technique, namely the technique of absorbing the great star. Feng Yun was shocked by such suddenness, and, falling to the ground, managed only to ask in horror what was going on here. Zhao Hualong, seeing what was happening to his disciple, himself experienced a fear he had never seen before and cried out, asking what kind of technique it was. Being held hostage by Yui Tianyun's strong grip, Feng Yun screamed, realizing that his spiritual Kai energy was leaving his body. At the same time, the familiar blue windows flashed in the air again, and the voice began to echo that the main character gets 1 experience point. Then 2, then 3. Feng Yun yelled for Yui Tianyun to let him go, but he did not even move, allowing the counter of absorbed points to reach first the mark of 16, then 17. Now the main character, smiling madly, got 23 and 24 points, now 33 and 34, then as many as 57 and 58 points. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, the tip of the blade popped out from under Feng Yun's sleeve, from which green smoke was clearly coming. In response to such audacity, Shizu Yun shouted that Feng Yun was hiding a poisoned blade, and immediately rushed to Yui Tianyun to help. But suddenly Zhao Hualong appeared out of nowhere and stopped her and exclaimed that she had no right to interfere in the duel. The elder himself was shocked by the turn of the fight, but he believed in his disciple to the last and that Tom would be able to defeat the main character. But, in response to Zhao Hualong's statement, Shizu Yun was surrounded by an incredible sparkling aura of power, and she ordered him to get out of her way. However, their brewing conflict was stopped by a loud cry of pain. Feng Yun stood with his own blade in his chest, and his face was distorted by a grimace of horror. In response to his plaintive moan, Yui Tianyun exclaimed haughtily that he was not surprised by his opponent's poisoned weapon. He, hitting Feng Yun's already limp body, declared that, as he expected, brothers are 2 boots, a pair. Seeing his disciple's body hurtling to the ground, Zhao Hualong shouted his name and rushed to him. The elder picked up Feng Yun's body, calling him by name, but he was no longer breathing. He, trembling with fear, rage, and grief, bowed his head over the body, while Yui Tianyun calmly stood aside. The voice congratulated the protagonist again and announced that he had successfully killed Feng Yun, a disciple of the Heavenly Spirit clan. And for that, Yui Tianyun gets 700 experience points and 20 madness points. Accompanying the announcement with a picture of a red ball, the window notified the main character that he had taken possession of a healing pill. Not believing in what was happening, the girls whispered with renewed vigor and zeal. They didn't understand if it was really Yui Tianyun and how he had become so strong. Only Shizu Yun was silent. She, seriously pursing her lips, said to herself that the abilities of the main character must be already at the 7th or 8th level of body improvement. Zhao Hualong flared up with sincere rage, and exclaimed that appearances were really deceiving and Yui Tianyun really wasn't trash, and that it wasn't surprising that he had killed Feng Cheng after all. At the same time, the main character calmly stated that both brothers were still stupid, and that their death was dog-like. He looked down on the body slightly madly and coldly said that both of them got what they deserved. In response to such baseness, Zhao Hualong jumped up and looked madly at Yui Tianyun, and in his head sounded only that this child should not stay alive. Someone loudly proclaimed that the winner of the first round of Tianzai Castle is Yui Tianyun. Shizu Yun breathed out a sigh of relief and said that he could come down now. But Zhao Hualong interrupted her menacingly, saying that he would not let him go so easily. He exclaimed that the main character had killed a disciple of their Heavenly Spirit clan, and since he had won, he should advance to the 2nd round. In response, Shizu Yun looked at him menacingly and said that the elder just wanted to kill Yui Tianyun. She added that he had already won, so he no longer needed to fight, and let Zhao Hualong not think that he could force them with the name of the Heavenly Spirit clan. Now she turned to the main character and asked him to come down, saying that he no longer needed to fight and force himself. But Yui Tianyun only exclaimed that he was fine. He confidently raised his head and only asked Shizu Yun to let him continue and prove that she had not made a mistake protecting him and that he was worthy of her care. Castle Lord Tianzai looked at him in surprise and thought that she had never seen Yui Tianyun like this. He asked what he had to go through to change so much in such a short time. Then Zhao Hualong joined in. He said that the fact that the main character killed Feng Yun does not change anything, and that the loser will forever remain only a loser. He turned to his other elite disciple, Mo Cheng, and said that he would be the next, merciless opponent, to which he tenderly bowed to the elder and accepted the challenge. The girls, seeing Yui Tianyun's new opponent, spoke warily. One said that now they will definitely lose, because Mo Cheng is at the 9th level of body refinement. Facing the opponent's gaze, Mo Cheng said that the main character is really strong. But then he added that Yui Tianyun's movements are too rigid and predictable, his strength is not explosive, and his movements are too slow. The young man smiled and haughtily said that if the main character could survive his 3 movements, then so be it. He would admit defeat. In response to Mo Cheng's audacity, Yui Tianyun smiled and thanked him, saying that he was too naive, thinking that he could finish him off with 3 movements, because he himself only needed 1 to finish Mo Cheng. In response to such a strong statement, he just kept silent. Zhao Hualong chuckled and asked if it was just because he won in the last duel that Yui Tianyun thinks he is invincible. Mo Cheng smiled, and, jumping into the air, declared that his first move would be the technique of flying cloud steps. His silhouette broke into many small copies and he, laughing, exclaimed that the hero should try to avoid this attack if he could. Shocked by what was happening, Shizu Yun realized that this was the technique of the Heavenly Spirit clan. But in response to such loud statements, Yui Tianyun only grinned. He instantly swung, rushed to Mo Cheng, and, hitting him with his elbow with all his strength on the jaw, declared that it was too easy for him.